Welcome to the Higher Love with Megan podcast with me, your host, Megan Cooper, a trauma-informed therapist, life coach and disruptor of wellness norms based in Brighton, UK. This isn't another nice-to-have wellness podcast. Instead, this podcast seeks to redefine what it means to be well in today's world. Here, we challenge the status quo, seek to reunite wellness with social justice and improve accessibility, diversity and inclusivity within wellness and beyond. As a listener, you are not here to passively consume. Instead, you are an ambassador for real, embodied, societal and systemic change in the world. As your host, I stand for radical self-inquiry and being able to have those confronting but necessary conversations so that we can remember our collective humanity at this time. We're here for the revolution and you've got a front row seat. Up on the podcast this week, we have Sumi Fitzgerald. Sumi, she, makes it simpler and easier for small businesses to make their services and marketing more inclusive. For those who are new to the language around DEI, DEI stands for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. Enjoy the episode. Sumi, it's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast this morning. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I was really, when you slid into my DMs, I was like, wow, I'm so excited for this conversation. And also a little bit like, shit, wow, you've had some really great guests. But I'm happy to be here.
You're just joining the list of great guests. So in excellent company. My first question to you is, as a DEI consultant for small businesses, can you explain what that means to you?
Probably the best way for me to answer that is to tell you how I got into it. I still am a DEI consultant for bigger businesses. I became really aware as a small business owner. I saw people around me struggling. Instagram loves to have its kind of everything goes wild. It feels like the world's on fire on Instagram. I saw small businesses grappling and I thought, where is the practical support that makes it easier and simpler for people to actually implement? There is so much more awareness now of social issues and inequalities in the world, but I think where we haven't quite got to, I hate to say that bigger businesses do it better, but they often do. Where we've not got to as small businesses is actually implementing and thinking about what does that look like in our businesses. I can see on Instagram that people really care about the injustices that we see in the world, and they're thinking, what can I do? You know, they're feeling quite helpless, and I don't want them to feel helpless. I want them to feel like, okay, well, here's what I can control. Here's what I can do in my small business. And this is what it actually looks like in practice to run my business in a way that doesn't just serve the dominant groups in society. It is really and truly for everybody. Thinking about how can you adapt your services and your marketing so that it speaks to and works for people who are marginalized communities.
Amazing. And you've described yourself, I loved this, as knee deep in DEI in one way or another for nearly 20 years. How did you get into this work?
Well, I wonder how far I'm going to go, but I'm going to go back to the day I was born.
Well, we've got an hour.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can't see this on the podcast, but I'm brown. And I grew up in a very white area. I'm also a bit of a gender weirdo as well. And I always had this feeling of I don't fit. You know, you don't notice it when you're really young, but certainly as I got older, I started to really acutely feel the ways in which the world wasn't really set up for me. I went off and I did an undergrad in sociology. You got to pick your modules. And it came to a point where it was a toss up between criminology or do I do race and ethnicity? And I did race and ethnicity because I think it had this real kind of, I just wanted to understand and know that I wasn't imagining it all. Growing up in a very white area, I didn't have other people of color around me to be like, did you see that? Or, you know, is it just me? Was that dodgy. What did they mean by that? I didn't have that. And so as soon as I did that module, I was like, if you meet anyone that knew me when I did that module, they will tell you that I was absolutely intolerable, because I was just like, anyone who would listen, I would just be like, and systemic racism, and here's all the ways that it's just woven into the fabric of our society. And they would just sort of, you'd get a few people kind of like backing away slowly from me. And then your kind of student loan ends and you have to go get a job. And I ended up in the charity sector. But then I really wanted to explore some of the themes that I'd started to look into during my undergrad. I did a master's in race and ethnicity. So I came at it first from a very kind of academic perspective, but at the same time, I was also, I was working in the charity sector, and very luckily for me, it was a charity that was a bit of a, I'd say it was doing DEI way before people even knew what that was. I had some amazing managers. I had a manager who had been doing LGBTQ plus inclusion. It wasn't called that at the time in the 80s, but it was kind of doing gay rights stuff at a local authority. So I learned so much for him about kind of that practical application. What does it look like in the real world? And it kind of, it took a while for those two parts of my experience to merge, because I had this academic side, learning all the theory, and then there was this practical side, and I wasn't connecting the two at all.
Totally. I love what you were speaking to there around the academic side, you know, being over here, and then the practical application side. In what ways were they not integrated? How are they so separate for you?
I think it's because almost like the two camps don't speak in a way. When you're in the world of academia, there's a whole language around it that doesn't really bear much relationship to the way people speak day to day in their business. So it's quite hard to make that connection. I do think there's a difference in what people's objectives are. In academia, it's very like, it's all about, it felt like there was almost like these romantic notions of like the pursuit of knowledge in itself. That's the aim.
Kind of like knowledge for knowledge's sake, as opposed to, what do we do with it?
In my real world day to day, it was very like talking about it in terms of, okay, so how do we deliver this service, given that our service users come from really diverse backgrounds. I was working in criminal justice sector. I did get some of that criminology stuff in the end. We know that people from marginalised groups are far more likely to be a victim of crime. I was working with people who've been affected by crime. And so you inherently have to think about, okay, but what does that mean? We know what the impact of crime is, but how do people's experiences intersect with what we know about what it means to be a victim of crime? We weren't even using the language of intersectionality. That it was a term that was coined in the late 80s or early 90s by Kimberly Crenshaw, but it hadn't made its way through to everyday language. We just had a sense of, okay, so what do we do? It came up with constantly seeing barriers in our services, right from, okay, well, if we've got a service user who wants to come in and have a session with a caseworker, can they actually physically get in the building? We started to build out things like, you know, even little things like thinking about transport. So I've worked in loads of different offices, but, you know, we'd be thinking about Old Street Tube Station doesn't have lifts. It's got a ramp to walk out of it. So actually, maybe we need to start telling people about, instead of saying things like, oh, it's a 5-minute walk. Well, it's only a 5-minute walk if you kind of walk at the typical speed. It was the kind of very real barriers that we were seeing people face.
Before we go on, I'd so appreciate you to hit follow or subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, click those 3 little dots next to settings to rate the show. On Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review or take a moment to explore how you can rate or review on the platform that you're listening or watching. This makes a difference. I truly believe we need to have more of these conversations to shake up the status quo. We'll beat the algorithm together with your clicks and shares. Now back to the episode. Really interesting hearing about the differences there. And I'd love to link this in to something that you wrote was how your coaching diploma. So after your experience in the charity sector, there might be some other years gone by that we haven't touched on, but then you going to do your coaching diploma, and you mentioned that your coaching diploma completely ignored systemic inequality.
Yeah.
I found that so interesting because it made me think about my own coaching diploma. Completely accurate. There was no talk about anything to do with systemic inequality. And it wasn't actually until my last couple of years training with Gabor Mate's Compassionate Inquiry organization that we went quite deep into systemic factors within therapy, within wellness. Can you speak to how that was missing within your coaching diploma?
I think the closest we ever got to it is, and I think this isn't just coaches, it's counselors, it's therapists, it's any kind of helping professional who cling on to this idea of being person-centered. They think that being person-centered is enough. They think that they're some neutral vessel that doesn't have their own experiences or beliefs, and that they would never project anything onto their clients. But none of us are neutral. We haven't grown up in a vacuum. We can't help but absorb all of this messaging. So yeah, it was mostly just treat everyone as an individual, don't make assumptions, all of which are true but don't actually help you in any real sense. If you go into a coaching session with a client and you've got in mind, don't make assumptions, treat them as an individual. Yeah, all of those things, but it's not very helpful. It doesn't really give you much of a guide as to what you actually need to say or do differently. And I think there's also a kind of danger in it because we all want to protect our ego to some degree. We all want to see ourselves as nice people who would never do anything to hurt anyone else. It's particularly the case in helping professions because we build up this idea of ourselves as inherently good people who are there for other people. You know, I'm not in it for myself. I'm there to help other people. And actually that ends up being a bit of a barrier to really exploring those darker sides of ourselves that we all have. It's a barrier to, you know, you can assume you've got the skills already just by virtue of being a good person. I've learned, you know, I've trained and worked with lots of different groups. People would assume that certain clients of mine would be the hardest groups to train. And I have got to tell you, it's not who you think it is. This is no disrespect to midwives, but they have been some of the most challenging groups I've ever delivered to because of the, we do this anyway. We're just here to help. You know, I always listen to people, you know, there's a real kind of just shut down to the idea that maybe there is something that you can learn here.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And I'm so pleased that you brought this up. I interviewed an amazing podcast host, Leah Kim, who has the Voices on the Side podcast. I interviewed her last year and she brought this up around the issues of white supremacy, that because in the wellness industry or yoga spaces or spiritual spaces, everybody regards themselves up to a certain point as being a nice spiritual person. It actually acts as this huge block to really doing the work, lifting up the hood and going to those grittier, perhaps more challenging places. And even a couple of weeks ago, my podcast editor, who's Lucy, who's biracial and amazing, she listened back to one of my episodes and it's like, Megan, you know, when you said that thing, did you think about it from this angle? And I'm like, oh, fuck. This stuff just falls out of my mouth. I haven't thought about privilege here and there because it's so to the core and in the
No.
fabric of who we are, right? So it's a very roundabout way of saying that I totally get what you're saying, that the self-identity around being a nice person who's trying to do something supportive and of service in the world can actually act as a really big block.
And it can be a red flag as well, because I
Yeah.
know for a fact if I stumble across someone's website and they've got a very kind of love and light, and they are like, I'm so inclusive, I want to treat everybody with respect and value them in some way, unless there is some evidence to prove that they don't just talk the talk, it can be a bit
Mm,
of a red flag. I also know
mm,
that those are the people who become the most offensive. If I ever have a problem, if I ever push back and say, actually, this isn't working for me because of this, or
mm.
when you said that, this is the impact it had, those are the people that can become the most,
Yeah.
I'm going to use the word dangerous.
Mm, mhm,
And actually, this is something that I've had to really grapple with, because I think to some degree we've all got something that we can use as a shield to protect
mm,
us from having to think about these harder things. For me, it was about hiding behind this very academic, intellectual thing. I was like, well, how could I possibly reproduce white supremacy? I have a master's in race and ethnicity, that
mhm,
kind of
mhm,
thing. And also using parts of my marginalized identity as a cop out. So
mm,
being like, how can I be reproducing these systems of oppression? Or if I'm using everyday language, how could I possibly exclude somebody? Because I know what it's like to grow up brown. I used to be very focused on, and this was even when I was a DEI consultant, which is a bit embarrassing for me to admit, but we're being honest here, so let's do it. Being so focused on the ways that I'm harmed,
mm,
and never looking at the ways that I reproduce that I harm other people. It's kind of embarrassingly recently that I've really started to think about ableism. I see this all over the place, the assumption that we're always trying to find some sort of shield to protect us, whoever we are, to some degree. I think that's a very normal and natural reaction to have. So bell hooks in From Margins to Center, I think it is, talked about, and I'm going to butcher this because I can't remember it word for word, but she was talking about feminism and the dangers of kind of using it as our identity label,
mm,
because it becomes about being one of the good ones, and when we make it part of our identity, we become closed off, because any criticism becomes a criticism of our identity. She was talking about not being like, I am a feminist, but I use a feminist lens, or words to that effect. And I really took that away and try to be like, I
mm.
am using an inclusive lens. That is helping me shift. I don't want to pretend that I don't have that urge to protect myself from any backlash or to present myself as one of the good ones, but it is something that I keep coming back to remind myself.
Mm. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think with all of this, there is also the pitfall of the moral superiority of that I know that I've definitely fallen into for at least 10 minutes, but also this big fear around getting it wrong as well, because within the school system, within the way that we've been brought up, within capitalism, it's all about being the expert, being the master of these things, getting it right, perfectionist tendencies, big fear around judgment, all of these things. And I guess that also comes up a lot with people.
One of the biggest barriers.
Mm,
The other barrier is time. Small business owners were spinning a lot of plates. I actually am starting to, for me, those things are quite linked. Time and not knowing what to do, but it feels like the time can sometimes be an excuse to not do the thing that feels a bit
yeah.
hard. I was, I've been telling myself for ages that I'm going to get on LinkedIn, but I kept going, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. And then I sat down with a brilliant content strategist and we came up with a plan of like some really easy things that I could post on LinkedIn, and I still didn't do it. And it was at that point where I was like, no, the time is just a excuse for me avoiding doing the thing that feels difficult because I'm worried about how I'm going to be perceived. And I think that happens in small business in every single aspect, but it's massively amplified when it comes to inclusion, because if I get a LinkedIn post wrong, it doesn't really say anything about me. But if I get inclusion wrong, what does that mean about me? It means that I am a shit person. It doesn't mean that at all, by the way. It means you're just a human. But what I make it mean is, oh God, I'm a terrible person. And I think that's how it shows up as a barrier. One of the bits of feedback that I often find myself wanting to give, well, I kind of do, just not in these words. I'll say it really bluntly now, but I always find myself being like, can you just stop being so fucking weird? You know, when people are trying so hard, they actually make it really awkward.
Yeah.
It's that. And that's the other kind of impact of not wanting to get it wrong. It's kind of getting locked in this internal dialogue that's like, oh, what if I get it wrong? I don't want to be seen as performative, and over explaining and over trying too much. I'm still working through how we can best move beyond that, because you want people to know this matters and I want people to care about it, and they really do. How do you make that level of care not spill over into making you act like a big fat weirdo?
Yes, I think when we're trying to not walk on any single eggshell, I mean, anyone whose feet are completely off the ground trying to avoid eggshells is going to be a weirdo, aren't they?
Yeah.
I think that something that has really helped me over the last couple of years, because I used to have, and still do to some extent, a chronic fear of getting things wrong. Because as you said, of like, what does that mean about me? Threat, nervous system alert, meltdown, all of the things. But one thing that's really helped me is every time something is pointed out to me now where I might have done something wrong or said something with privilege that I hadn't ascertained before, or said something that was potentially harmful, it's almost like rejoicing in that, of like, oh, I've identified another way in which I'm not being inclusive, or another way where actually I'm not being that accessible, which is only a good thing.
Yeah.
And also recognizing that it's not necessarily me that is saying that or doing the thing. It's like all of the conditioning from all of the generations, decades, centuries past that has been infiltrated into my system, that I'm kind of like a conduit to.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's not just me being a bad person, but it's just, oh, well, obviously I would say something like that because of the programming that I've received. And I've just spotted another way that I don't have to be harmful anymore. That's been quite a helpful reframe.
Yeah, for sure. I can see how that might be quite a weirdly comforting thought in lots of ways. And yeah, it's not your fault if you've been conditioned, all of us have been conditioned to believe things about the other, and that's not our fault. It is our responsibility. We don't need to blame or shame ourselves for what we were taught to believe, but we do need to take responsibility for doing something about it.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so glad as soon as you said that, it's not my fault, my head automatically filled in, but it is our responsibility. So you took the words right out of my mouth. I love that. On the topic of responsibility, I would love to deviate onto the practical application of DEI, because, you know, something that we kind of hashed out and at the beginning of this podcast as well is there's a lot of awareness about this stuff. But then what does that actually look like in practical steps?
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk more about this. You talk about inclusion and equity versus actually doing it. Could you just speak to that?
Yeah. I'm going to start with a bit of a tip is the right word, but what I will say is, I think we've all seen there's just been this huge surge in content around social justice issues. We are becoming much more aware, picking up some of the language of academia, grasping those ideas. A lot of the stuff on social media is really quite good, just thinking about it from the perspective of, I've got a master's in race and ethnicity. Some of the race and ethnicity content on there is brilliant. What I want us to start doing, and you can do it if you're doom scrolling, if you're caught in a doom scroll and you're watching these videos, is yes, enjoy the tingle of, wow, I've seen something from a new perspective, because that feels really good, doesn't it? Is to then ask yourself, so what? So what does that mean? What do I need to do now? And just that small shift will start to get you in a place where you are focusing on implementation rather than just becoming aware for the sake of being aware. I call it kind of social justice wanking, when we just kind of learn and talk and use all these big kind of words like intersectionality, is very needed. We need all that kind of theoretical intellect. We need the people who understand what's going on and can articulate it. Then we need the implementers. We need the people who translate it. And that's where I see myself stepping in. So yeah, the first thing is asking, so what? So what does that actually mean? There is a little bit of, it's not that awareness and action, one is better than the other. You need both, right? So when you're looking at making your business more inclusive, there is a bit of upfront work to do. It doesn't take a lot of time to do it, but you need to understand who is missing from your business and at what stage are they dropping out, because that is giving you clues as to what your problem is, basically. So to just kind of illustrate what I mean by that is, if you take a look at your Instagram followers, and if you go through there and you're mostly attracting people like you, that tells you where people are dropping off in your client journey. There's a few reasons why you might lack diversity in your followers. It could be because you're simply not in the same rooms as diverse groups of people. Your content is just not being put in front of anyone who doesn't share your dominant identity. It could be that you are not communicating your inclusive values enough. Someone is landing on your Instagram profile and you're giving them the ick because you are not making it clear that you are for them specifically. I don't mean you have to become a coach specifically for people of color or whatever, but something about what you're putting out into the world is not saying, I can meet your needs too. It could be that your content is not accessible. Someone literally cannot consume your content. They can't see anything you're saying, or they can't hear what you're saying, or they can't read what your post says because you haven't thought about things like color contrasts. So you can look at your client journey and think about where people are dropping out and what the possible reasons for that might be before you go in gung-ho and go, right, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to do this. Because, it's great that people are doing some things. I've noticed that most people now have pronouns in their bio. A lot of people will be sharing posts to stories that show their values. And that is brilliant. We want you to carry on doing that if it feels safe for you to do that, because it's not, particularly for anyone who doesn't use kind of pronouns that don't conform with what people think they should be. There is a certain element of danger in putting your pronouns there. But if it's safe for you to do so, put your pronouns in your bio. I'm never going to tell someone I'm never going to say, oh, don't worry about that. But I am going to say that the things you need to do look different for different businesses. You need to understand what your problem is and fix the problems that you have, not just kind of look at, oh, you know, Megan's done this, I'm going to do that for my business. Great. But again, does Megan have the same problem? I don't know why I'm talking about you in the third person, like you're not actually here. But, you know, do you have the same problems around inclusion in your business that I do? Probably there will be some overlap, but also I'm going to have different issues. It's understanding that. I have actually got a free mini course that literally walks you through, gets you to kind of map what the diversity in your business is telling you, where people are dropping out, and therefore what your problem is that you need to focus on. It's not very sexy. My course is very sexy, but this task, if I say to people, map what your business is telling you, I know it doesn't sound like the interesting stuff, but it is that foundational piece before you can look at implementing.
I love one of the things that you were saying in there of sometimes, even when the intention is wanting to be accessible and inclusive, sometimes it's a case of not getting yourself into the right rooms or into different rooms, let's say. And I know that this comes up a lot in conversations that I have with other practitioners within the wellness space, that, you know, if their audience is from a particular cultural or socioeconomic group, how do you get in front of a different audience? How do you usually speak to that?
So I think it's important to make it really clear that inclusion is a whole ecosystem. So you pull on one thread. I can tell you, for example, how to get your business in front of, you know, in front of people who are different to the kind of demographics that you're attracting. I can tell you that. But there is also something about what is your message going to land with them. So you've got your message, and not just your message. Is the inside of is your message congruent with what happens inside your business? It can feel like being tricked if on the outside people are like, I'm so inclusive, I've got pronouns in my bio, and then you turn up into their service and actually you get on a group call and everyone's going, hi ladies. I don't want to say this to kind of overwhelm anyone, but I just want people to understand that it's all kind of connected. So let's say your business, you are not getting in front of a diverse group of people. It's understanding. So if we think about how we bring people into our world, in our businesses, we're kind of, so I'm a little bubble. You're a little bubble, Megan, your business, all the people in your world, and all of our networks overlap, don't they? So with this podcast, you'll put this episode out and people in my world who didn't know you existed will be overjoyed to hear that you exist, and they'll be like, cool, I'm gonna go and check Megan out, and vice versa. That's how business works in general. Now, our bubbles can be diverse or not diverse or somewhere on the spectrum. So if your particular bubble is missing certain groups, you need to move your network across so that it overlaps with someone who does have those people in their bubble. So it's not any different to marketing anyway, right? You're already thinking about things like, how can I audience borrow? How can I do collabs? I can do podcasts. I could do ads, although I've never had any success with ads and they scare me. Whatever it is, you are always thinking about, how can I pull people into my bubble who are in bubbles outside of mine? The difference is, when you're thinking about it with inclusion, is adding that inclusive lens. So I'll use ads as an example. When you're selecting, you have to create your audience, and you might do that by oh God, there's going to be an ad specialist listening to this being like, what are you talking about, Sumi? I'm not an ad specialist, but you kind of select what demographics you pick, or you select it based on their interest. And what you need to think about if you want your business to be more inclusive is to really think about what buttons you're clicking. Because if let's say I'm trying to target my ads and I say, oh, I want send this to people who are interested in Home and Country magazine or Country Living magazine. Do you know the one I mean?
Yes, I know of it.
I'm picking on it because my mum's got a huge stack of them at home, and I went through and I literally one day counted the people of colour I could find in it. It was not good.
No, I can imagine.
Step up your game, Home and Country, or whatever you're called. Do you see how you can make decisions where you're kind of, you click, you say, I want people who are interested in Home and Country magazine. Automatically, you are pulling in a particular demographic. So think very carefully, always have that question in mind. Does that help?
Absolutely. Totally. And I love what you were also drawing attention to around language as well. And I know that language has been a big thing for me that I hadn't even thought about until I started doing a lot more local authorities work. In any workshop that I was leading, there were very diverse neurodivergent needs, people who were able-bodied, people who were impaired in some kind of way. When I was leading classes, there were some people in wheelchairs that I would have to give different cues to. And that was so expansive in a way. I don't know what the word is, but for me, just to kind of retrain myself as a practitioner and as a human, to be thinking about all of the things that I'm saying, is it accessible to this person? And what you were talking to of when people land on our pages or our website, that can be a massive barrier to entry, can't it? Just even our use of language.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've all experienced it, maybe not around inclusion, but we have all landed on someone's website and thought, yeah, this isn't for me. And that is good. We want to be repelling people who aren't a good fit for us or our service, but we don't want to be repelling people for the wrong reasons. So this is why we need to be thinking about this stuff. What you just described in terms of all the things you're having to think about when you're delivering those sessions for diverse groups. And actually, I would say, even if you've got a non-diverse group, even if you've got a room full of white cis men, act as though your room is full of diversity, because one, you don't know that it's not, you can't always see it. Two, it is modeling inclusion. Three, more inclusive stuff generally tends to work for everyone, although there's a caveat here that sometimes people's needs do clash, so you've got to work with that. What you described, there's a name for it, it's called an equality analysis. Just as you were talking, I was like, I've got to develop one later for a charity, but actually it's a tool that small businesses might use. I might create that for you small businesses. But it is exactly that. It is firstly being like, who are the groups that I need to think about that I don't normally think about because it's outside of my experience? If I just go about my day-to-day thinking about how I do things, I might think about cultural background, I might think about gender, because those are things that affect me, but I might not think about things like physical accessibility or digital accessibility. So I need to be extra mindful of those experiences I don't have. I might write a list of people I need to think about at all times. And when I'm doing something, the first question I'm going to ask myself is, what are the barriers for people? If I've written a workshop or anything I do, what are the barriers for these people that I so easily forget? And then what can I do to minimize or completely get rid of those barriers? And that, in a nutshell, is what you need to do over and over again for an inclusive business. So that's my job. I am just a walking quality analysis tool. If you can hone that and get yourself into the habit, it will feel hard, it will feel clunky at first. It's okay. Keep asking yourself those questions, and that is how you will iteratively work towards a more inclusive business.
Yeah. I love that. And something that comes up for me there is on your website, you talk about something around compassion without collusion. Could you speak to that?
I think people are quite scared of us DEI folks because you think we're going to tell you off and make you feel like a piece of shit because you're not being inclusive. The feedback that I get consistently is that I will tell you exactly what you need to know. Sometimes it can be quite difficult feedback, but I always do it in a way that is compassionate. It doesn't feel like I'm telling you off. Does that sum it up?
Yes, it does.
Good.
Thank you.
It's because all of my other answers were really long. So when I did like a 1-sentence answer, I was like, weird.
I missed something. No, not at all. And I also wanted to bring this in too, that something else that you speak to and is also very visible within your website, because like I mentioned to you, I had a right old laugh not looking at your website, a laugh with you, reading your website. And something that you draw attention to is humour as a powerful tool for social change. Can you speak to that as well?
Yeah. So if I'm going to get everybody making their business more inclusive, and that's what I'm going to do, mark my words, is social justice, like inclusion, all of this stuff feels heavy to people. People assume it's going to, there's the heaviness of all those internal thoughts and feelings that we've talked about before. There's the heaviness of like looking outside your window and feeling like the world is burning. And if I'm going to get people to think about inclusion, I have to make it simple. I have to make it easy. I have to make it fun. I need to, if I deliver a workshop and people leave feeling heavy and they leave feeling, just why would you carry on? Why would you be like, I'm going to focus on inclusion and, I'm going to sit down for an hour and just feel like shit. Whereas my take on it is if I make you laugh, if I make you have fun when you do inclusion, you're going to want to do it more. And inclusion is fun. It's like this is the, I'm people ask me like, oh, is it really hard doing your job? And sometimes yes, but I have a bloody whale of a time. I love it because I bring that humor. I feel like I'm setting myself up for, you're not gonna, if you booked a call with me, it's not going to be like a stand-up show. I don't want to like over promise here, but it's part of my strategy, if you like, for making this something that people want to do, because it doesn't have to be heavy. Some of the things you can do are so simple, they're so quick. But yeah, the other thing I've got on my website, so I really thought about doing a PhD, and what I was going to do it on was using humour as a tool for social change. But I didn't do it because my master's nearly broke me. But and I also can't do that particular topic now because we have a thing, I think it's called critical humour race or something. It's a thing now. It's the kind of humour that like Trevor Noah and people like that do. But I really truly believe that it's a brilliant tool to be exploring some of those more difficult parts of ourselves. If you can laugh at the same time, it diffuses some of that defensiveness, diffuses some of that hard feeling. So yeah, big fan of having fun with DEI.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you would like to bring in? Anything else that we haven't covered that is screaming for your attention within this conversation?
I think people think that in order to have an inclusive business, that you have to know everything about every person's possible needs. And I just feel like it's worth, I just really want to give people that reassurance that it's not that at all. With DEI, there is a lot of best practice already there. We know things that work, and that has come from the people that it affects. There are loads of autistic people telling you what you can do to make your events more kind of accessible for them. You know, there's loads of Black women telling you what you need to do to consider their needs and create safe spaces. You know, it's already existing. So you've got best practice. You can listen to people and what they're telling you. But also, the biggest thing is just make space to ask. You know, so just I'll give a little quick kind of practical thing that you can do is, if you've got a call booking form, is to ask the question, do you have any access needs for our call that would be useful for me to know about? And they'll tell you, oh yeah, actually I need it recorded, or, you know, I'm going to use, I need automated captions, whatever. You don't need to necessarily know all the possible things that someone might ever need. Great. It's brilliant if you can preempt it and have it there in advance, and you should. Sorry to bring the law in, but the Equality Act, as small service-based businesses, we've got what's known as the anticipatory duty within the Equality Act 2010. This is UK, which means we've got a responsibility to anticipate the adjustments that disabled people might need. I'm not saying that to scare you. Nobody's going to come and smack your bum. You'll be fine. But it is about anticipating people's needs as far as you can. But then for everything else, you can always ask. So it's creating those moments where you can ask, and don't just ask once, ask routinely, ask anytime at kind of each phase of your service. So yeah, that's the only thing that I really want people to understand, is you can make your business more inclusive without having to become some expert on every single possible kind of access need, or, you know, what every single community wants, because you can't. I'm not there and never will be. You can still take action anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that you'd like to share?
No, that was fun.
Sumi, how can people get in touch with you? Where do you live on the internet? Please let us know, and anything that you have on offer.
So you can find me on Instagram. I am Sumi Does DEI, but there's dots in between. So Sumi.does DEI. My website, sumifitzgerald.com. I've got a free guide that you can download. It's called 5 Things I Have to Tell Almost Everyone, because we are getting the same things wrong that are quite simple to fix. So you can download that if you want. I have this free mini courses. Actually, it's the first 4 lessons of my kind of bigger course called Inclusive Biz Foundations, where I walk you through writing an inclusion action plan. So you've got these really specific, what do I actually need to do? And then I will review your whole plan for you. But you can do the first 4 lessons of it for free. It's that groundwork. It's understanding what the problems are in your business and what might be causing those problems, so you know what to fix. Apart from that, I've got an email. You can sign up to my email. It's called Things I Don't Say on Instagram, where I share the more kind of the stuff that's hard to fit into a caption, or that I'm too scared to put on an Instagram post because the trolls might come for me. So yeah, you can find me on Instagram, email, website. That's probably the best places to find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been really awesome. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your wisdom and magic. So thank you.
Lovely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. It's great to have you with me on this journey towards higher love for all. Our time is our greatest commodity and gift, so thanks for investing it in yourself and sharing it with me. Please do take a moment to rate and review the show, all of which enables more people to find me and for me to connect with more great guests each week for both yours and my enjoyment. All links, references and contact information is detailed too within the show notes. And I always love to hear your feedback, so feel free to hit me up on my Instagram at higherlove_with_Megan or via my website higher-love.com. Send your takeaways, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share or send on to someone else who would benefit. Until next time, big love.